if we're going to, every player has their price, of course. It needs to be 90 million before we even think about it.
I've looked at that midfield and just thought it lacked legs and it lacked the ability to kind of get around the pitch.
Yeah, obviously Hjulmand has played 65 times under Amorim.
That I think it could prove to be a masterstroke in the future, even though you're talking about a lot of money.
They are considering life without Rodri.
50, 55 million, I think it could be done. I do.
Hello and welcome to Transfers Exposed. I'm Will Pugh. That right next to me is football broadcaster Harry Symeou. Harry, great to have you back in the studio with us, mate. Thank God.
Great to be here with you, mate. And this is, of course, your exclusive press pass to all the hottest transfer stories straight from the Sunsport newsroom.
Absolutely, mate. And we are here every Tuesday. And now Tactics Exposed is back on Thursdays. That Thursday slot has been moved to Fridays, but we're still with you twice a week until the transfer window slams shut on September the 1st, breaking down all the facts and figures in the biggest deals of the transfer window.
And in this video, we're going to cover the man that Manchester United are targeting if they can't land Carlos Baleba.
Absolutely, mate. Big exclusive on the back page of The Sun this morning, Friday morning, going into the weekend. Manchester United will target Sporting Lisbon captain Morten Hjulmand if Brighton refuse to sell Carlos Baleba. That is the story. Exclusive, a duo between Steve Brenner and Catherine, who's going to be all over all things Manchester United for us this season alongside Martin Blackburn and our excellent United team up there up north. Quite an interesting story, this one, Harry. We broke the story along with a couple of other publications last week about Carlos Baleba and Manchester United's interest. The story was that initial talks had taken place between club and camp via some intermediaries, as is the way with most transfer stories this summer. Like, clubs just talk to the player first, make sure personal terms wouldn't be a problem, that they're interested. Then they do the admin bit of actually making an offer to the club. That story come out. Brighton, at the time, absolutely no intention of sanctioning the sale this summer. They're not in a financial position where they need to do that. But it very much was, look, if we're going to, every player has their price, of course. It needs to be 90 million before we even think about it. It now appears Manchester City have come in for Baleba. The potential of, having to replace Rodri, which seems wild considering he's the current Ballon d'Or holder, but obviously injury problems. Before we get on to you looking at Hjulmand, just what did you make of the whole Baleba thing?
I think he's a really talented player, and I think he's someone that would really benefit Man United. For a long time, I've looked at that midfield and just thought it lacked legs and it lacked the ability to kind of get around the pitch. And whatever way they've tried to kind of shuffle the pack, they've never really found that right balance. If you drop Bruno Fernandes that bit deeper, you get some technical ability, but you don't get that bite in midfield that you probably need. When they've used Casemiro there, obviously, he's not the Casemiro that he was in the past. And so I just think balance has been the real sort of thing that's missing in that midfield. Baleba would bring that, and he's got such a big potential upside because he's such a talented player that I think it could prove to be a masterstroke in the future, even though you're talking about a lot of money. But it's Brighton we're talking about, and we know that Brighton don't sell for cheap. As you mentioned, they have no need to sell for cheap. And so Manchester United, if they want the player, they're going to have to stump up their cash. I'm not surprised that they're looking at alternative options. And if they were to sign someone like Hjulmand, who I'd imagine will probably cost maybe just over half of what they'd have to pay for Baleba.
Well, United are looking at a £50 million bid. That's what they're looking at the moment. So, yeah, exactly what you're saying, just over half.
And if you get that player in for just over half, that you should, in theory, free up funds to do some other bits of business, because I think Manchester United need more than just a midfielder to kind of call this a really good summer and to build and generate that confidence that they can have a much better season. Yeah,
well, it's quite interesting. We covered on the first Tactics Exposed of the season that Dean Scoggins and I did yesterday, Thursday that was. Head to the Sunsport YouTube channel to have a look at that. We did a really good analysis on Gyökeres versus Sesko, but we also did quite a lot of deep dives into Manchester United's midfield. It's absolutely flying at the moment. So once you finish watching this, go over to the Sunsport YouTube and make sure you watch that ahead of Sunday's massive Prem opener between those two teams. Harry, what do you think? Because you've got Kobbie Mainoo as well. There's a really interesting piece. I think it's Martin Blackburn or one of our United team wrote in the paper last week saying Kobbie Mainoo, England's superstar as he is, real up-and-comer, is sort of struggling to find a place within the Amorim system. Ugarte's in there as well, obviously a bit more of a disciplined 6. And then Casemiro, as you mentioned, I think everyone's agreed he's certainly not at, league title, Champions League level anymore, decorated career as he's had. What do you feel it is that United need?
I think it is someone that can sort of bring you the balance between being a bit of a destroyer, being someone that can close people down, win the ball back, give you that intensity in midfield. Yeah. But the player's got to be able to play as well, because in this Amorim system, it's really, really important that you have that skill set. And I think in Ugarte, who I'd seen play previous to him joining Manchester United, because he was really impactful in a game against my team, Arsenal, a couple of years ago now for Sporting. You always felt he had that bite, but you didn't know if he had that ability to step into that more advanced position and make things happen. Hjulmand feels more like a 6 to me as well. Yeah. He certainly made his name at Sporting playing in that slightly deeper role. But I think if you've got 2 competent players in that area of the park that are maybe more defensive leaning, then you can allow those players further forward to just be a little bit more free in their position. And I think that's the key. Someone like Kobbie Mainoo, I mean, I really like him. I think he lost his way. He lost his way a little bit last season. I think that was largely down to injuries and then trying to get back to his best form. But there's got to be a space for him in that squad. But it is a squad game now, isn't it? More than anything and more than ever before. So I don't look at certain players and say, well, if he's coming in, that means the end for this player or anything like that. Yeah. I don't think you have to worry about that. I think there's room for all of them.
No, quite. I mean, the interesting thing is, and Dean explained it really well yesterday, is that he still expects United to sort of set up in that 5-2-3 system. Obviously, all the money they've spent on that front 3 of Mbeumo, Cunha and Sesko, those 3, even if Sesko doesn't quite make it for the Arsenal game on Sunday, that's going to be their first choice front 3. Which literally just leaves kind of 2 central midfielders. They'll play with the 3 centre-backs, probably Ahmad and Dorgu as the sort of marauding fullback kind of thing. Bruno Fernandes is obviously going to play, which means because he can do both at both ends of the pitch, although he will be required to do a little bit more of the picking the ball up from deep, he's still going to be on the ball a lot, which does make you feel that the other position is vital, really, but that they have to be really, really disciplined. And obviously, Hjulmand has played 65 times under Amorim in that sort of system. But Dino was making the point that he expects Amorim to be a bit more flexible this season, and that perhaps you'll see that 5 sort of shift into a 4-2-3-1, depending when and where United have the ball. From what you know of him, what do you think he's adaptable enough? Is he mobile enough? What sort of player
he's definitely mobile enough. He's definitely adaptable because he's a really intelligent footballer. And you've mentioned it already, like how big is the adaptation going to be when he already knows that system inside out, having played so many times under Rubem Amorim. I think Amorim, though, does need to evolve things a little bit at times. I'm not saying all the time. And I think actually, despite the stick he got, I think he was right to come in and say, this is my way, you've got to learn it, and almost write off last season in terms of the league campaign, hoping for the fact that people would learn the system and be more confident and comfortable in it, because he's not going to change completely. He's not going to rip it up. But there are times, and there will be occasions, there will be times where teams come to Old Trafford and sit behind the ball. And then why do you need 5 defenders? So he's going to have to be able to kind of chop and change it a little bit more than he has in the past. And the more top quality, adaptable players you've got at your disposal, the easier that is to do. Yeah,
Hjulmand's release clause is £68 million. Like I say, it looks like now, because Man City are coming in for, or there's certainly interest there in Baleba, and that depends on how they evaluate the Rodri situation. You kind of suggest that, or you kind of feel that because Man City haven't doubled down and extended his contract, that they are considering life without Rodri, just based on his fitness issues, really, because Pep Guardiola and City fans won't want to let the club get into a position like last season where their entire success kind of rested on the absence of one player, didn't it? Or lack of success, I suppose. So they're looking forward. Baleba, they feel, would be a good fit for them. Obviously, how do you replace a peak Rodri? That's impossible to say, but Brighton's initial sort of suggestion that 90 million would be enough to take Baleba from them is likely to shift to above 100 now. Manchester City are interested, particularly if there's 2. But for 68 million, if that's what United end up having to get nearer to, which is his release clause, they're preparing that £50 million bid, like I said. Obviously, we saw with the Mbeumo deal, Manchester United was sticking to their guns for quite a long time, as were Brentford, and eventually it was United who caved, as tends to happen when the buying club is Manchester United. If it's closer to that 60, 65 million pounds, do you think that's good value, or do you think that's paying a bit over the odds?
I think that would be paying slightly over the odds, just in my estimations of the player, but the market is what it is nowadays. You know, £50 million, it feels like a kind of nominal amount of money now. It doesn't feel like a crazy amount of money like it did many years ago. Look, the release clause is in place, which gives Sporting a strong negotiating position, and it allows them to kind of push as hard as they can. But ultimately, I think they would probably deal at less. And I think this is where, you know, you mentioned it at the top of the video, we were talking about players sort of having those conversations even via intermediaries with the buying club initially. You kind of get an indication of how much they want it, and having the player on your side and the player pushing from that end, then it can cause a problem for the selling club and put them in a position where they're more open to accepting less. So I think 50, 55 million, I think it could be done. I do.
Absolutely, Harry. Also, Rasmus Højlund to Fulham is on the cards. He came out earlier in the window, didn't he, saying, look, I've got a Manchester United contract. I expect to be a Manchester United player next season. That was, of course, when the Benjamin Sesko deal hadn't yet been done. Fans quick to forget, I think, that Højlund was bought in for not dissimilar money to what they've paid for Benjamin Sesko. The narrative was very similar, wasn't it? He'd had an okay season at Atalanta. It was fine, wasn't it? It was like good, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't Gyökeres's numbers at Sporting Lisbon. Arguably, though, albeit that Serie A and the Bundesliga with Sesko are tougher divisions than the Portuguese top flight. I think it's fair to say you have to take that into account. United would be very keen to let Rasmus Højlund go, more so because not that they don't particularly rate him, but just his contribution weighed against the salary they're paying him and the money they paid up front. It would make sense they still feel that obviously they've been a bit shortchanged there, as do the fans. I don't think that's sort of saying anything too extreme. They'd be happy to see him go. I don't think they would hate it if he was there either. It would obviously help with their financial situation. They're still trying to get rid of Jadon Sancho. Garnacho looks like the Chelsea move will happen. They've obviously managed to get rid of Rashford. Anthony and Tyrone Malacia still sort of knocking about Carrington out of hours. Højlund to Fulham, what do you think?
I think Højlund is a talented player. I do think there's something in there. I think he was playing in a broken Manchester United team, and when you're a young player who's still developing, you need stability around you, and Man United haven't had that. I think I cover Italian football a lot, and I remember at the time when Manchester United went in for Højlund, I remember people saying, you know, there was two schools of thought. There was one school of thought, which was the Serie A as a league cannot allow young, talented players to move on,
right?
You know, that early in their careers. You want to keep them, you want to nurture them, you want to give them a platform, and they will improve your league, and your league will be better for it. But then when the price came out, when it was talked about that Man United were going to pay 70 million euros or whatever it was at the time, people were like, well, for that
72 million quid from Atalanta 2023,
There you go. At that point, people were kind of like, well, if you're Atalanta, you absolutely have to take this money.
Of course.
But there was, you know, people got carried away with where Højlund was at. There was clearly talent. There still is talent. There is still something there. Confidence, you know, can be important. And I think he's lost a bit of that at Manchester United. I expect him to say, I want to stay and I want to fight for my place. That's the right thing until you're told that, you know, you don't have a future. But if that's the case...
What else are you going to say?
Yeah, exactly. But if that's the case, that Manchester United are really keen to move him on, he should take the move. Sometimes you have to take a step back before you can take a step forwards. And I think that's the case that Højlund finds himself in.
Well, let's do a little bit of a breakdown of the facts and figures here at the moment. So AC Milan... keen on Højlund as well. Obviously, it would make sense. He's proved himself in Italy before. £4.5 million loan fee, right? Obviously, United would always prefer to get some money in and get these players out the door, but they do realise, given the contracts they're paying some of these players, whose performances have nowhere near warranted those wages, that sometimes for them a win is just simply getting the wages off the books for a period of time. So £4.5 million loan fee with a £39 million option to buy next summer, which doesn't sound too bad when you take a bit of amortisation into the like the PSR calculations. It'll be 3 years he's been at United by then. It may even at £39 million, if I'm doing my maths right on the spot, I think that would actually represent a profit. So maybe not the worst deal from United's perspective, but as is for a merry-go-round, Atalanta like the look of Rodrigo Muniz at Fulham, which has then opened the door to Fulham coming in. Marco Silva has been quite disparaging in the paper today, actually, about his owners, saying that they've been hesitant in the transfer market and a bit passive, and that he wasn't expecting it at all. Clearly not happy, and a manager who's been onto a good thing at Fulham, just quietly going about some impressive business on the pitch. So that could then open up the door. As a fit, as a team, as a club, do you think, given sort of his general attitude and the way he carries himself, Højlund, maybe he's just gone into a shell a bit because of the overwhelming pressure at United. Do you like that as a fit?
I do, because Fulham are a good enough team to provide him a platform to show what he can do.
Yeah.
But there also isn't anywhere near the same level of scrutiny or pressure that you face at Manchester United. And sometimes when you're going through a bit of a bad patch, you just need to be taken out of the limelight.
Totally, mate.
And going to Fulham would take him out of the limelight. I know he'd still be in the Premier League, and I know there'd still be an interest in how he fares because of his Man United past. But I think it would just enable him to go out and be himself again. And as I say, Fulham are a good enough side that he won't be chasing shadows for 90 minutes every week. If you're telling me he's going to go and join Burnley, for instance, with all due respect to them, then I'd say, if I'm you, Rasmus, I'm not taking that move.
Yeah.
But a club like Fulham are probably going to be around about mid-table or just below. I think that works. I think it works for everybody, and hopefully they can strike an agreement.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was talking to Ross McCormack just this week, actually, for one of our Inside Stadiums series, another one you can go and watch on the Sunsport YouTube channel if you fancy it, talking to him about Leeds and all the plans they're doing, and mentioned how when he left Leeds, he went to Fulham, and he was talking to me about the huge difference in, like, it's almost a culture shock to do such a move, because when you're playing for Leeds, you're out in the city, and it's the whole city who are behind you, want a bit of you, like desperate to know what you're up to and want to be around you. He said, you go to Fulham and you feel like an absolute nobody. He said, obviously there are Fulham fans like dotted around the ground, but you go out in London for a day and you just get on with it. No one really cares who you are. No one notices who you are. And he said that's different for different players. He said he was the sort of type who loved it at Leeds, and lots of players thrive under that constant microscope and attention. Whereas others, he was talking about Tom Kearney, who has been at Fulham a very long time, and it's like quite a nice life. Do you feel, knowing what you know about Højlund's playing style, having watched a bit more Italian football than most, and probably have seen him at his best, whereas most Premier League and Man United fans wouldn't feel like they have, Fulham who play this quite like quick, exciting, I don't want to say counter-attacking, that's a bit disparaging, but they like carrying the ball and breaking with it quickly from deep, getting the ball out wide and trying to get up the pitch fast. Do you feel his playing style would suit that if he's playing at his best?
Yeah, I do. I think it's much more in tune and aligned with what he would have been doing at Atalanta.
Yeah.
Gasparini's side were always very kind of well set up, well drilled, as are Marco Silva's, but always with that intention of being able to break out and attack people on the break, like you've just mentioned. So I think it will certainly be to become a top player, which I still think Rasmus Højlund could become.
Yeah.
He needs to adapt and play and find a way of being effective when he's facing a low block and all the rest of it, because that's what the top teams invariably come up against. But again, just rewind it back, just take it back to what he knows, take it back to what he's good at. And I think it would work. I think his playing style, would suit Fulham. And I think Marco Silva's a smart enough coach to understand like what it would take to just extract the very best out of him. And yeah, I'd love to see him make that move, because he's a far better player than people give him credit for.
So Hjulmand in, Højlund out. United fans, let us know what you think of both of those in the comments.